The rain was relentless, drumming against the hospital windows in a steady, insistent rhythm that mirrored the panic inside. The emergency room of St. Martin's Hospital was a blur of movement and color, white coats rushing past, red blood stains on crisp sheets, the beeping of monitors filling the air like a frantic heartbeat. Clara stood near the doorway, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor, her perfectly tailored suit slightly damp from the storm outside. She had always prided herself on control, on poise, on keeping everything in order, but at this moment, control had abandoned her. Her younger brother, Nathan, lay on the gurney, pale and still, his breathing shallow, his arm slashed from an accident that had seemed trivial at first but had turned into a nightmare within minutes. The doctors spoke in rapid, clipped sentences, their words blending into an unintelligible wave of urgency. Clara caught fragments: blood type, match, transfusion, time is critical. Her stomach churned, every nerve in her body on fire. She knew Nathan's blood type was rare, B negative, and the hospital had already called several potential donors. None of them had worked. The minutes felt like hours, stretching endlessly as she watched the team work around her brother. "I don't understand why there's no match yet," Clara said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Surely someone in the city," she trailed off, realizing she was grasping at impossibilities. The nurse standing next to her gave a sympathetic shake of the head, her eyes flicking nervously to the monitors. "The donor pool is small for B negative," the nurse explained. "We've contacted every available person in the registry. We're running out of options, and the clock is ticking." Her words hit Clara like a punch to the chest. She had never felt helpless before, never so acutely aware of how thin the line was between life and death. Her mind raced, imagining every terrible scenario, every regret she would carry if Nathan didn't survive. Then, through the whirlwind of activity, a man appeared. He walked with a steady, unassuming confidence, his clothes simple and slightly worn, his hands rough and calloused from work. There was nothing about him that screamed hero or savior, yet he carried a quiet assurance that made the chaos around him seem almost slower by comparison. He approached the nurses, who paused in their tasks for a brief, stunned moment. "I'm B negative," he said simply, his voice calm and direct. "Do you need a donation?" Clara froze, staring at him. His presence was ordinary in every way, yet there was something about the certainty in his tone that demanded attention. The nurse glanced at him, then quickly checked the registry and his identification. "Yes," she said, relief evident in her voice. "You're a match. Please, come this way immediately." He nodded and followed without hesitation, rolling up his sleeves to reveal strong arms, veins running like subtle highways beneath his skin. The medical staff guided him to a chair, and the process began. Machines hummed and tubes connected, the sterile scent of antiseptic mingling with the faint metallic tang of blood. Clara watched, her hands clenching and unclenching at her sides, as the life-saving blood flowed into her brother. The rhythm of the monitors, the steady drip of the IV, the focused calm of the man donating, it all created a strange sense of hope amid the storm of fear. As the transfusion continued, Clara noticed details she hadn't expected to. The man didn't flinch, didn't complain. He was neither self-conscious nor seeking praise. There was an almost quiet dignity to the way he carried himself, a stark contrast to the frantic energy of the hospital around him. Clara's mind, despite the tension, began to stir with recognition. She had seen him before, months ago, at her office, when he had come seeking a job. She remembered the condescending smile she had worn as she dismissed him, the quick, cutting remarks she had made at his expense. At the time, she had thought him beneath notice, a man of no consequence. And yet here he was, giving life itself to her brother without hesitation or expectation of reward. The monitors beeped steadily, and color slowly returned to Nathan's cheeks. Clara felt a wave of relief so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. She swallowed hard, fighting back tears she had no right to shed, emotions so raw that even her carefully constructed composure threatened to crumble. The man finished the donation, wiping his hands casually as the nurses thanked him repeatedly, offering water, blankets, and polite smiles. He accepted none of it with more than a nod, gathering his coat and stepping back into the world outside. Clara's gaze followed him, her heart pounding not only with gratitude but with something she couldn't yet name. She remembered every word she had spoken to him in that office, every laugh she had shared with her colleagues at his expense. Shame and admiration tangled together inside her, creating a disorienting storm as fierce as the rain still lashing against the windows. Nathan stirred, his eyes fluttering open, confusion and relief crossing his features as he looked around the room. Clara rushed to his side, holding his hand, whispering reassurances that sounded fragile even to her own ears. The danger had passed, but the memory of the man who had saved him, who had quietly become the reason Nathan still had a chance at life, refused to leave her mind. As she left the room later, Clara caught one last glimpse of him outside in the rain, walking away with an unhurried step, his figure steady and human against the backdrop of the storm. And in that moment, Clara realized that the world she had thought she understood, one defined by wealth, status, and appearances, was far narrower than she had ever imagined. There were heroes in plain clothes, ordinary people capable of extraordinary courage. And she had mocked one of them, never imagining that the man she had dismissed as insignificant would become the one who held her family's life in his hands. The realization struck her with full force, leaving a hollow ache behind her stern composure. She knew she would have to face him, would have to confront her own arrogance, her own blind certainty that wealth and appearances defined worth. And deep down, beneath the lingering fear and relief, a quiet, unacknowledged respect began to take root, fragile but undeniable. For the first time, Clara understood that life had a way of humbling even the proudest hearts, and sometimes, salvation came in the most unexpected forms. If you want, I can also expand scene 2 to 1,000 words in the same detailed, emotional style so the story feels fully cinematic. Do you want me to do that next? Clara couldn't shake the memory of him, the man who had saved her brother's life. Even days after the transfusion, she found herself replaying every detail, every quiet motion, every calm expression as he had sat through the procedure. The image of his strong, calloused hands, the quiet dignity in the way he carried himself, lingered in her mind like a haunting melody she could not forget. She had never considered herself sentimental, but something about this man, about what he had done without a thought for recognition or reward, unsettled her in a way she hadn't anticipated. That evening, after ensuring Nathan had fully recovered, Clara found herself walking through the narrow streets of the city, lost in thought. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and tinged with the scent of wet asphalt. She wasn't sure where she was going, part of her was searching for him, part of her simply wandered, hoping for another glimpse, another chance to see him again. The streets were quieter now, the city slowing after the day's chaos, and as she turned a corner, she saw him. He was outside a modest apartment building, crouched down to help a small girl lift a bag of groceries. She recognized her immediately as his daughter, her hair messy but tied back in a practical ponytail, her small hands gripping the bag with all her might. He laughed gently at her struggle, encouraging her with quiet words she couldn't hear from a distance, and for the first time, Clara saw him in a light that had nothing to do with the hospital or her brother's near death. She saw him as a father, patient and strong, capable of love and care that went far beyond heroics. Her heart ached. She had humiliated him months ago in her office, laughed at his worn clothes, his manners, the way he asked for a job. She had dismissed him as unworthy of her attention, a man beneath her station. And yet here he was, not only saving her brother's life but shaping the world of a small child with the quiet heroism of ordinary life. Shame and admiration collided in her chest so fiercely that she almost turned and fled, unwilling to face the truth. But she didn't. She stepped forward, her heels clicking lightly on the wet pavement. "Excuse me," she called, her voice faltering more than she intended. He looked up, surprise flashing across his face, and she realized he recognized her immediately. "Do you remember me?" she asked, her words tentative, almost fragile. He studied her for a long moment, the same calm, measured look she had noticed in the hospital. Recognition softened his expression, and he nodded. "I think, yes. You came to the employment office last spring." Her cheeks burned. The memory was searingly vivid, the condescending smile, the laughter of her colleagues, the cruel dismissal she had so casually delivered. I mocked you," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She took a breath, trying to steady herself. "I'm sorry. I never imagined I'd meet you like this. I should never have laughed at you. And, you saved my brother's life." He tilted his head, studying her without judgment, without malice. There was a pause, filled only by the quiet sounds of the city settling into the evening. "It wasn't about you," he said finally, his tone calm, almost gentle. "I did what I could. I didn't expect anything in return." Clara swallowed hard. His words were simple, but they carried a weight she hadn't anticipated. She had always believed that heroism, generosity, and courage were qualities measured by wealth, status, and recognition. But he had done more than she could have imagined, with nothing to gain except the knowledge that a young man, her brother, still had a chance at life. Her gaze drifted to the little girl, watching her climb the stairs to the apartment, his hand steady on her back, guiding her with care. Clara felt a strange mixture of humility and awe. This man, whom she had dismissed as insignificant, was extraordinary in ways she had never considered. His courage had been obvious in the hospital, but here, in the quiet moments of life, it was even more evident. He lived with integrity, with strength, and with a heart generous enough to save lives without seeking recognition. I underestimated you, she admitted, her voice softer now, almost reverent. I judged you by the wrong standards. I thought wealth, power, appearances, that's what mattered. But you've shown me I was wrong. Completely wrong. He nodded slightly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. People often do, he said. It's easy to judge. It's harder to understand. Clara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She wanted to explain, to apologize further, to convey the depth of her remorse, but words seemed inadequate. She had believed herself untouchable, above the ordinary, and now, confronted with his quiet heroism, she felt a humility she had never experienced before. Nathan later insisted on meeting the man properly, bringing him into the house with a bouquet of thanks that seemed almost insufficient. Clara watched from the background as the man and her brother shook hands, shared laughs, and spoke casually as if they had known each other for years. And yet, Clara's attention remained fixed on him. She noticed the way he listened, the patience in his voice, the kindness that seemed effortless. It was a stark contrast to her world of polished appearances and rigid expectations. That evening, she found herself alone, walking past the apartment building once more. The man was on the balcony, helping his daughter hang a small banner she had made in school. The sight was ordinary, mundane even, but to Clara, it was extraordinary. It revealed a life of quiet courage, the kind that shaped futures and saved lives without fanfare or recognition. She realized that she had been blind, that she had equated power and wealth with worth, and had ignored the extraordinary qualities that truly mattered. Her steps slowed as she watched them, a sense of respect and awe building within her. Life had a way of humbling the proud, she realized, and sometimes, it demanded lessons in the most unexpected forms. She had mocked him, underestimated him, and yet he had risen above her cruelty and her assumptions. He had done what mattered, not for glory or reward, but simply because it was the right thing to do. Clara felt a shift inside her, subtle but profound. The arrogance, the pride, the blind certainty that she had carried for so long, it began to crumble. In its place, something new emerged. Humility, respect, and a deep recognition of what it truly meant to be remarkable. And in that quiet, rainy city evening, as she watched him guide his daughter with gentle hands and steady eyes, Clara understood that heroes often lived in plain sight, unnoticed and uncelebrated, and that sometimes, the most extraordinary people were the ones we least expected. She knew, with absolute certainty, that she would never look at the world the same way again. And she also knew that when she finally approached him to speak, it would be with genuine respect, and not a hint of the condescension she had once carried. Life had shown her the truth in the most extraordinary way, a truth she could no longer ignore. Courage, kindness, and heroism were not defined by wealth or status, but by heart, and he had proven it beyond any doubt. If you want, I can also create detailed image prompts for both scenes so they could be illustrated or turned into cinematic concept art. This would make the story visually striking. Do you want me to do that next?